Dave, you're the oldest. Let's go.
All right. Well, Dave Mackie, played for BC. This would have been my third year. Hopefully we get something, or else I guess I just bypass right to year 4. But I played my ball at Western U for 5 years. Came from Bill Carruthers Secondary School in Unionville before that. I grew up in a little town called Jackson's Point. It's like hour and 40 minutes north of Toronto. Commuted to the high school there because it was a really, really cool place, really wicked opportunity. Played quarterback most of the time because we didn't have football until grade 10. I got a bunch of people to sign a petition, and then we started football in grade 10, and then no one knew how to play football. So I was like, I guess I'm just slinging the rock. And then I was pretty good at it. But I realized it just wasn't going to, get me any further. I think Bishop's recruited me as a quarterback or something. And then went out there, had a great time as on a visit. But then I switched to receiver for my final year of high school. And then I got a bunch of opportunities to check out different schools and head out to Western in 2013. Was a receiver there for about 6 weeks. And they're like, this man is 6'3", 200 pounds. Let's just slap 30 pounds on him. And, 2 years after that, I was sitting at almost 270 playing fullback at Western, having the time of my life. And then I realized that I'm too damn big to be playing fullback. And then I finished my career with the Vanier Cup, which was fucking awesome. And, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Nikola, you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. So Nikola Kalinic, tight end / fullback for the Hamilton Ticats. Been playing playing football since grade 11. Last year was my first professional year of football. Came from a small high school, Silverthorne Collegiate Institute. Started playing football in grade 11. Up until that point, it was all about basketball and volleyball. Got a couple offers to go play basketball at the university level in Canada after a tournament out in Nova Scotia, but continued to pursue football after playing 1 year of summer ball. Had a couple of awards in my, senior year, yeah. And then in my junior year, had one award. Been through it all. Been through a couple coaches, couple different OCs, a lot of players that have come and gone. But yeah, that's about it.
I was gonna say you kind of play like a volleyball player.
Yeah.
BC Lions fullback. Was drafted this past year. Played 4 years at Laurier. Was fortunate enough to start all 4 years. Before getting to Laurier, like Dave. Like Dave, before getting to Laurier, I actually played receiver and played quarterback. I played quarterback in high school. I played at like a AA high school, which was, nothing crazy. But then when I would go and play Spears with my summer ball, I would play receiver. Was scouted to play receiver at Laurier, but unlike Dave, I showed up too fat off the jump. I showed up at like 250 pounds as a receiver. Played my whole first year as a receiver. Didn't play whatsoever. Was pretty much, I guess, redshirted, but just wasn't good enough to really get on or make the 47-man roster. Came back going into kind of our off season. Was told that I was going to be switched to fullback. Spent a whole off season learning all the route concepts and everything, and then wipe all that away and start learning how to kind of block with your head, like you guys are saying. Then just kind of progressed as it went from there. First couple of years were shaky, and then not until my third or fourth year did I actually start, I think, getting confident and comfortable with the system and stuff. And then from there, worked my ass off to get to the combine, did well enough at the combine, and was fortunate enough to be drafted. So that's where we are, yeah.
Awesome. So I appreciate having all you guys on. And, we were kind of talking before about, the fullback position being an interesting spot to play. And one of the things that I think anyways interesting about it is you're a part of so much, right? Like, in obviously being involved in Mario's career at Laurier, but seeing you two guys, playing at York and Western and, now even in the pro, it's such a versatile position. There's a lot of receivers that, don't really know much about the box, and there's a lot of O-linemen that don't know a whole lot about pass concepts. But, at fullback, you're not really afforded, that luxury. And I think it's a great way to learn the game, and it's something that more and more people, are using in their offense. The first question, kind of more of a player's perspective, you guys making the jump from the U Sport level to the pro level, kind of what was the biggest thing that you had to change or that you had to work on, whether it be physically, mentally, technique-wise? What would be the one thing that you were, maybe you were trying to work on it, or maybe you just realized kind of going through the process that this is something that you need to work on, that biggest kind of change from the U Sport level where all you guys, excelled to the pro level? Dave, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool question. I mean, you hear it all the time, but at the end of the day, it's all relative, right? It's when you go from high school to university, right? It's like you think you know football, but then all the technique-wise, all the playbook stuff that comes into it, right? The physical, attributes that you have to grow and develop in terms of the pass game and just you working in the gym, whatever it may be. You get to the next level, the physical part, that's why there's a combine, right? You know that you belong there, right? They wouldn't have you there if you didn't physically fit in. So that's where it really boils down to the technique and the mental side. And, the more you play the preseason is just kind of, it's fast and furious like we talked about earlier. But then you realize that until you actually fine tune those techniques, you're going to lose the rep, right? And I'd say the biggest thing for me was film study. Like if you think about, when you guys first got to York and Laurier, it's like, all right, let's figure out what, like you just said, Mario, what's the offense doing? What are the route trees? What is the purpose of my position on offense, and how does that fit into the bigger scheme of things? Well, realistically, by the time you're in your last year of university, you know your role. But then once you go to the pros, it's like, okay, forget about what the offense is doing. You should know that. I mean, you're getting paid to do it, so you should know it. Now, what's going on the other side of the ball? Like you really start understanding the nuances of defenses. And once you start getting that, then the technique starts making sense. The fundamentals of offense start making sense. And I think that's the biggest jump is you have to put that time in to actually understand the nuances of the game on both sides of the ball. When you're at college, you think I just want to go pro. I want to be good at my position. You watch your own film. You watch your own steps. You watch your own mistakes. Where at this level, it's anticipated that you're not making those mistakes. And when you make those mistakes, you messed up. You misstepped, and you got beat. You don't have to go back and be like, well, how did I get beat? I got swam. Like, what the hell? I don't know. You got beat. Okay, Now you go and look at the defense. And, okay, why did he do that? And why did he give me that? Why did I give him this? And that's going to make, the biggest difference, for me.
For sure. Nikola, what would you say yours is there?
I think definitely to agree with Dave is the competition is a drastic jump. You go from playing guys in the OUA from Ontario, maybe from just out of province, to going up against guys that have been first team All-American for the past 4 years at Ohio State or something like that, like some Big Ten school or something like that. But also just the speed, quickness of the players, I think was the biggest difference. The CFL players are also much bigger and stronger compared to before. And it's you're going up against guys that are grown men that have been playing professional football for 5 or 10 years. Is also a crazy, something that you're not expecting. You could be expecting, but you don't really expect it until you get hit or you make a hit. And yeah, I don't know. For me, I was really lucky to have one of my coaches from York, Kamal Peterson. He was a huge inspiration and kind of pulled me out of a hole. My first 2 years, they were rough. I didn't really think that I had to do a lot to be such a good football player. But then he took me under his wing and kind of explained to me that within a couple of years, there's going to be a position if you want, you could pursue it, and I think you have a good shot. So I took that, but I think he taught me pretty well what to expect coming into the CFL.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I think even for high school guys that are making the jump, it's not that, you shouldn't feel confident that you can do it. You just got to understand that, hey, there's expectations from you whenever you make a jump, whether it's high school to university or university to pro. A guy who's, maybe been a pro on special teams who wants to be a starter. It's about finding what you can do to improve your game, kind of like you said there, Dave. What would you say, Mar, is your number one thing that changed from university to pros?
I think just being a sponge, just to grow on go on with what these guys are saying. The technical aspect of everything does change. And the biggest thing that I think people should at all 3 levels is not comparing or going back to, well, we used to do this. I used to do this way, so maybe it'll work out this way. No, like whatever you've kind of learned, you can use, but you have to be a sponge, and you have to. The biggest thing for me was learning and actually listening and applying everything that we talked about in meetings and going out to the field and doing it. And then the other thing was, I mean, being at Laurier, I was used to always taking the number 1 snaps, right? You're honestly, when you get to your 4th and 5th year, your coaches have a lot of trust in you, so you can take the snaps that you kind of pick and choose in practice. When you get to the level, when you get to the CFL, sorry, it gets to the point where like you can't count your reps. You have to make your reps count, right? So you have to go in and not really think about, oh shit, these guys are bigger than me, these guys are faster than me, these guys are this, these guys are that. It's just kind of being a sponge. That's the biggest thing that I took from my first year, being a sponge and being able to take in what you learn from the film and apply right on the field, I would say.
For sure. So kind of the next question is more of a, I guess coach-related question, but, there's so much you can do, offensively, the offense we ran at Laurier and the offense that you played in at Western, Dave, the offense you played in, Nikola, at York. So different. All 3 of you guys, though, in your more senior years, huge parts of what you do offensively. And I think it's one of the fun things about using a fullback or tight end is there's so many different ways that you can employ a fullback or tight end. And one of the things that we got a couple questions on actually was, is there any, particular type of motion or things that people can do formationally with a tight end that maybe you did in your university career, maybe you've been exposed to at the pro level, maybe it's something you've even just seen other teams do. But in terms of using motion or formation involving a fullback to kind of create some confusion on defense or even just an advantage on offense, do you guys have like a particular, motion or formational use of a fullback tight end that you think kind of creates an advantage? Mario, do you want to take that one first?
I think personally, one of my favorite things in Jax, you'll attest to this, are slips, what we call slips. So a lot of the time, like Nikola was saying, we're playing against guys that are bigger than us, faster than us, like honestly, just almost better athletes than us, right? Because I mean, like you said, these guys are just coming off 4 years of being All-Americans or playing at D1 schools. So the use of slips where defensive ends think you're coming for them, but then at the last second, you kind of you move yourself and then you go pick up either a smaller body or pick up a different guy, and then you allow your teammate to come in and kind of either cut him or slow him down. Just those slips help so much when it comes to being able to attack guys one-on-one, because he doesn't know if you're actually coming to hit him this time or if you're going to slip him again and he's going to get his out, or if he's going to get cut again, right? Those are one of my favorite things, I think personally, just because it allows me to play the game within the game. It allows me to set guys up. It allows me to attack and play fast while he's kind of in the oh shit moment. What's going to happen to me, right? You kind of put him on an island, and it allows you to play faster, I think.
For sure. Nikola, you got anything there in terms of motion or even just formation?
Yeah, I think it's the freedom to be able to motion around, to keep the defenses guessing, just moving around, helping the quarterback see if they're playing man or zone or who's going to be guarding who, and then just being able to like run block, pass block, and then like run routes. I think that's that for me.
Yeah, I think it's such a key. Like if you look in, now like the game's being played, it's so much more of a hybrid position. Like you don't have, like the old school, like the Devlin, the guy from the Patriots, probably one of the last. He just retired. Like true, fullback, line up in the fullback spot. Now it's such a more fluid position, and guys are, more like you guys that played, like 20 years ago, a guy that was playing fullback for the Ticats would probably not have had a volleyball background.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's such a different position athletically, and I think, especially in the Canadian game, being able to move guys around is huge. Dave, anything you have there that you found useful in your career?
Well, I mean, you guys pretty much summed it up. I think it's just the freedom of emotion, and I think what I had a lot of fun with my time at Western was like I basically had free motion. Like my last year, Snyder ROC was basically like as long as you're in the right place at the right time. He would give me some suggestions, and don't get me wrong, there was not freedom at first. It was very much you have 3 set motions, and then once you get those down and prove that you can be in the right place at the right time, And I think if it's a player that's asking this question, it's just do what you're told and be exactly where you have to be when they tell you to be there, because then you can start playing around with it. And everyone has a different style. The way I play, the way Nikola plays, the way Mario plays, it's the same position, but style is everything, right?
Yeah.
And we can get the job done efficiently, but at the same time, it's not all going to look the same. And what works for me may not work for them. And what I got to at the point of my end of my fifth year, I love motioning back and forth across the formation in the backfield because you can identify trackers, and trackers are huge, especially in the OUA, because it comes up to a matchup game. I think when we played Laurier, it was like me versus Messam for fourth quarters, right?
Yeah.
Where I went, he went, and then as soon as you start seeing them, right, if they're rotating or shifting around, it just allows everyone in the offense a better picture of what's going on, right? If they know that they're not bumping and if they're just rotating, all right, things start opening up. But in terms of one particular motion that I like that we started installing a little bit this year, and I see Hamilton use it with you, Nikola, is that when you're in a wide open position, you motion back in down to a tight end spot to cap the edge, and it's just you can have an eye of what's going on in the box, which as much as rotating around the top is awesome to see what's going down in the secondary and what's kind of fitted into the box. But when you're actually coming down the line of scrimmage, the DBs hate it because they got to pass things off.
They have to add in. Yeah.
Because originally they were thinking, oh, this is great because either there's a DB matchup on a big body or they got to bring a linebacker outside of the box and the DB's got to insert into the box. But as soon as you add back in, you get a way clearer picture of the box before you actually add in. I think it's a really cool thing. And, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, you're 250 pounds. You're standing out there by the numbers. I mean, hell, it's exciting.
Give it one of these.
Yeah, give it one of these. On the line. You wave off the other guys. So it's, it's cool. But just I think if this is a coach that's asking the question, give your guys a little bit of freedom, but obviously, have them in the right place at the right time.
And I think, too, it comes down to, like, what are you ultimately trying to get, like, out of your two-back stuff, right? And, you
Exactly.
guys at Western did such a good job. And as I've kind of, moved up in my career in the OUA and gotten to see teams, like, I feel like we've played you guys 36 times in my 5 or 6 years at Laurier. And you start to pick up on different things people are doing. And I always thought you guys did a really good job of that, of, the motion to anyone, if you're just watching it, it almost seems random, like, oh, he starts here and he finishes there. And, this time he started over here and finished over there. And then when you look at it in sequence, the amount of information you can get, whether it's as a play caller for future reference or as a player for that kind of immediate, hey, on this play, when I moved from the field to the boundary, the linebacker shifted. Now, for example, your O-line knows that when you cross the formation again,
exactly,
that's going to be the response. And I think there's power in that. And it's not hard, right? Like, it's not something that, maybe a lot of people recognize as a player when you're in high school and stuff, because you're just trying to do your job, like you said. But when you kind of develop in a system and you understand, hey, if I'm going to run some kind of split zone where I'm crossing the formation, if I cross the formation before the snap, I'll see how the defense is going to adjust to what I do.
And the one thing that you got to coach, I don't think it's coached enough, is making sure your O-linemen know what you're doing.
Yeah.
They think it's irrelevant. Tackles are notorious for being like, yo, you with me? No? Okay. Like that.
Yeah, 100%.
And they'll be like, you with me? And you're gone. They're like, oh, guess I'm alone. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's just vital too. And it's whether that's at the college or pro level, right? They're worried about their job too, which I totally understand. But if you can coach them early, just saying, know what your motions are in the backfield, even if it's a running back coming down to the, from a pistol to a shotgun, like just that alone can give you some cues on what the backers are doing. So I think if you can slowly start to teach your O-lineman early to pick up on that thing, because most of the time it's like all they hear is like 45, like they could care less about any other thing in the cadence, so or in the play call. But if you can start coaching your O-lineman about motions, it'd be awesome.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing that we had at Laurier was the fullback position was taught like the O-line position. So when you first start, and I think that's the biggest thing, because I was blocking like a tackle and blocking like a guard almost, right? But it put us all on the same page. Putting us all on the same page, like you're saying, like now you know those cues. Okay, if a linebacker, let's say, walks down, I know the tackle's gone and I'm by myself.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Just having everyone on the same page, I couldn't agree more, yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's so much of the margin for error in the box is so small that it doesn't even need to be you step the wrong way. Just if you hesitate, your margin for error is just as Yeah,
Yep.
you know, it's just the same as a guard or a tackle, right? Your margin for error is so minimal. So I think having that understanding is huge. This is a pretty open general question, you know, that we got from a high school coach. When you're as a fullback, obviously you're a little bit different than offensive lineman. You have the ability to move, you know, like we kind of alluded to, you know, before when we were all talking, you're on the move a lot when you're in blocking schemes. So it's a little bit different. What would be your biggest coaching point when just working at a fundamental level for improving your ability to stay on blocks? So, you know, you're in that, whether it's first level or second level, whether it's any kind of scheme, not really focusing on that, just in general, you know, if you're trying to maintain a block, whether it's downfield or on the line of scrimmage, what's kind of your best advice for either a drill or just a coaching point in terms of what you're looking for in that situation? Nikola, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, for sure. We were always taught like low man wins, so get as low as you can. But that's the thing; it's like you have to be comfortable being that low, or else you're just gonna fall face first. And we've all probably been there before.
Oh yeah.
And it
Too low you get swim
but
on.
everyone has. But also just to like make sure you have like a good punch. Like make sure you're kind of trying to lead with your hands. Like it is difficult for younger kids because they just know like sometimes they're thinking what the coach saying is, oh, like go through him. Okay, well I'm gonna physically try to go through him, but it's like that's what my first couple of years were like, oh, try to go right through him. It's like, no, you're supposed to lead with your hands, like try to punch him, and then like whatever comes behind you is what comes behind you. But also just run your 3 feet through contact. My coach always used to make a point that the first person to make contact with their foot after they establish contact, that is usually the winner. So like, for example, when a running back meets a linebacker in the hole, if the running back plants their feet and keeps their feet driving, they're most likely going to come out unless they're facing some Brian Urlacher body. So, but yeah, and just like being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think especially on the move, you find yourself, you know, a lot of blocking fundamentals is not a natural body position to be in anyway, right? So I think especially when you're a fullback and you're on the move, and I always used to say this to Mar, whenever anything in an offense changes, it's always us. It's like, oh, this is the same play. You know, like for you guys, you know, at Western, it's just power. It's just different for the fullback. Well, that's fine, except it's just different for the fullback all the time.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot to think about that spot. You know, Dave, what would your kind of advice be there? Just looking to maintain blocks in general.
Honestly, I mean, run your feet is like the go-to. I think we're all still guilty of it. You could put every single game I played on this year in the CFL, and there's blocks where I didn't run my feet, and it's evident, right? Because it gets to the point whether you're gassed or you mistime it or whatever, you're not going to be perfect all the time, but it's something that you always have to be constantly aware of. And the best way to do that is in drills. Like we touched about, you know, an hour ago, is that we only may get 20% of snaps, 25% of snaps, 33 if you're having a hell of a day. So it's like, in the grand scheme of things, some of those may be routes, some of those may be outside zone, some of those may be, you know, power schemes inside zone. You never know. So you can only get those practices running your feet and running your hands through drill work. And like you said, the game changes for us, right? If you're a guard, most of your blocks are at one of two angles, right or left, right? So if you're a fullback, you're coming from motions, you're coming from a 3-point stance, you're coming from a 2-point stance, you're coming from a prowl motion. So to just say run your feet, it's almost monotonous, right? But at the same time, we all understand that we got to run our feet. The low man wins, and there's all those key coaching points. But allow your athletes to do it from different levels. So if there's a coaching drill, I mean, you got to give them some variety, because they're going to see all sorts of shit, especially if they're playing teams. Like they got to make those same blocks on kickoff return and punt return, that maybe they got to utilize that backhand through and then get their inside hands and then run their feet. Okay, now if they're doing it from the right-hand side, but they never drilled it from that side, they got to bring their hands and their feet, right? If they're coming from a tight end position, they got to time their hands and their feet at the same time. So I think it's just a matter of just getting them constantly exposed to different angles, and, you know, whether it's a DN that they're blocking or a linebacker or even a DB type, right? You're going to face just about everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's something, you know, as a coach myself, like you're always guilty of, oh, we drilled that this week. It's like, well, okay, you did a drill that's about that, but you're look at those situations, even if you just look at outside zone, how many different situations a fullback can be in on outside zone? Backside, front side, is the D end outside shade, inside shade? You work into a linebacker, is the linebacker outside shade, inside shade? Are you helping with the tackle? Are you by yourself? So you get lulled into that false sense of security of, yeah, we did outside zone doubles. Like, why are we having this issue?
It's like, what are you talking about? You're 14 years old. We drilled this on Monday, and now we're playing Friday.
Yeah.
You should have made that block. It's like, what are you talking about, coach?
It's tough. It's tough. And I think especially at this position, like you said, there's so much variety. So, Mar, what would you have there is your general fundamentals?
These guys honestly touched upon everything I would have said. The only thing I can honestly add on to, and as a fullback, you have to do it, is you have to be aggressive. You have to be aggressive, and you have to show up ready to fight, right? Because like these guys were touching upon, you don't know, you're blocking so many different guys, right? Whether it's a smaller DB, a linebacker, or a defensive end who's 6'8", 280 pounds, like, you have to bring the fight. Because, like, you can get into the best position, you can literally run your feet, you can do everything perfectly, but if you don't show up ready to hit someone, you're not going to be where you want to be.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. That's the only thing, really, being aggressive.
And I think it's
don't be surprised. Don't be surprised by the contact. Right?
Don't be
You're the one that's supposed
to
be initiating the block. So don't be surprised that, okay, sure, Coach said we drilled it on Monday. Coach said we're playing a game today. Expect to be in the fight.
Yeah. The other thing is like getting to the point and getting to the attack point and then hitting the guy so hard, or like Dave said, being surprised that you made the block. It's like sometimes as fullbacks, I've been guilty of it. I've come in and I've hit someone and I've knocked them 4 or 5 yards back. And I've been like, and you kind of forget where you are. It's like, no, like staying with it, being aggressive, and just continuing to run your feet.
For sure. On a bit of a different, looking at some of the other aspects of fullback play. And I know as I was putting together the graphic for this, I was able to find all you guys catching the ball, which was fun. Now I think Mario's may have been in warm up, but that's okay. That's all right. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And so that's obviously a part of what you guys do too. And I find that a lot of high schools, you use a fullback, like a lot of you guys might have had more touches. Maybe if you played receiver, that might not be true. But, if you look at, I think the high school fullbacks that I played with that were more true fullbacks in high school, they might have caught 1 or 2 balls their whole career. A lot of you guys might have more pro catches, than even in a high school career, or certainly in university, all you guys are getting lots of work. But it's a little bit different as, a bigger bodied guy. And what kind of advice do you have for guys that, whether they play tight end or fullback, if they're being used in a more Canadian style offense where, at times you're that 5th receiver and you're running routes and being an integral part of the passing game. What do you guys kind of look to do in terms of getting open? Obviously, there's fundamentals that translate as a receiver, but do you have any advice for guys, as a bigger body guy? Some of that, advice the receivers use, you can use it, but it might not always be applicable to the situations you're in. So, Dave, do you want to lead us off with that one? Like, what's kind of your advice?
Well, I feel like I got like a twofold answer, right? One, in response to guys that aren't used to getting the attention in high school. And this isn't a disrespect or slight towards high school coaches or anything like that, right? But a lot of them don't know what the hell they're doing. And they're doing it because they love the game and they want to see kids have fun and play football, which I absolutely respect. But at the same time, some guys are miscasted. We've talked about this, right? And, okay, well, you're going to play fullback because you want to, or yeah, we need a fullback. Well, forget about what your coach is saying. If you want to play at the next level, put the time in, right? Run routes. Throw the ball around with your buddies, right? Like, there's just because your high school coach is telling you that this is the system that you're fitting, right? You're not a pro. You're not fitting a system anymore, right? You're a free athlete that can do whatever you want in your free time, and that's really what's going to make the difference between you just being a high school fullback that catches 2 passes in a season, and you get to be a university fullback that gets to go on to bigger, better things at the time that you put in on your own. But in terms of actually utilizing a skill set, it's use your size, right? Like we're not blazing speed here. So if you can actually use your length and separate, if you can actually chicken wing someone off, right? Like a DB is not going to want to get up close and personal on us, right? What they want is for us to try and bend a route so they can jump it. Like that's what that's what a DB wants to see when they're playing someone like, us 3. Where if you actually step on their toes, use your size, intimidate them, and use your length, chicken wing them off you, that's when you're going to get separation on those hooks and those quick balls, because at the end of the day, if you're running a corner route, that's just, you got to push the distance, step on toes, and run the route. But where we make our money is those, 5 to 7 yard routes where you actually have to utilize your size. And if you can't do that, if you're not comfortable doing that, that's where it boils back down to what I was talking about, is understanding defenses. If you understand where the holes are, you don't have to be fast. You don't have to be a giant. You just have to understand where the holes are. And if you understand the nuances of who you're playing against, you know that a hole's going to be at, a 14 to a 10-yard pocket. You're going to have to wrap around the will because he pushes further out to the hash. Whatever it may be, you have to find those holes.
Yeah, and I think that's something, especially in the Canadian, game, there's so much space. I watch the NFL stuff, and it's like guys are in a shoebox. But, in the Canadian game, there's room to kind of create for yourself. What would you kind of add to that there, Nikola?
Just to add on to, you try to always catch with your hands, right? You never really want to, if you're a big guy, you want to maximize your catching radius. So, you want to be able to throw your hands up and go get the ball with your hands and not really think about cradling it in, because that's when the shorter, smaller guys can actually make a play. And yeah, just make one miss. I was always taught, my coach always taught, because I was trained with the receivers, because we didn't really have a fullback position other than just myself for first couple of years. Make one miss. There's always someone that's going to try to hinder your way of succeeding and getting extra yards maybe. Make one miss, or at least make an admission to the ride. And other than that, it's very similar. What I would always recommend to anyone that's trying to understand how to use their body is maybe play a game of basketball, or learn how to play basketball, learn how to move. The movements are very similar in basketball with football as well. One-on-ones, when you're going to box out a guy in basketball, it's very similar when you're trying to go up and grab a ball, a jump ball, for example. But other than that, that's that.
For sure. Mario?
I think the biggest one that I learned this year was the change of pace. I always used to think that I had to get from point A to point B to point C as fast as possible and make it look as good as possible, right? And a lot of the time you're not running your routes 100%. You can't run your routes 100% because we're breaking in, we're breaking out, we're doing sometimes we're trying to put in a double move and stuff like that. The change of pace is knowing where you have to getting there, but getting there efficiently, right? So I mean, if let's say you have to run a hook at 10 yards, right? I might go out at 75% for the first 5 against the DB, then cook it for the next 5 yards, and then all of a sudden I shut it down, right? That change of pace and stepping on the toes and being physical and just having those different tools in your toolbox, I think really, really helps. If you could put all 3 of them together, that's huge, right? Because now you're bigger than the guy. He doesn't know where you're going, and you're catching it with your hands. I mean, it's. I think the change of pace is huge for us.
And I think especially, like you kind of mentioned in the Canadian game, there's so much space. There's certain routes you run in the route tree, being 100% going into a cut doesn't help you any because the quarterback's not there yet in the progression or whatever, right? And
you can't
use that.
No.
But you can. If you got a field side corner route and you're running that at 100%, you better have an arm. Thank God we have Mike Riley because at least he can put it out there. But it's you have to utilize change of pace. And I mean, you could look back at film. I mean, you talked about Brian Marshall earlier in this call. He had thousands of yards at Western. Yeah. And he was the king of change of pace. And he caught anywhere from a seam to a boundary side corner to a field side post, whatever it may be. He changed of pace every single route, and he was just making a killing.
Yeah, it's something that I think too, especially as a bigger guy, it's if you're running something hard in or hard out, you're almost forced into it, right? We've all seen and played with guys, that are pretty elite athletes at the receiver position. I got to see Curly Gittens work for 4 years, and those guys can basically do what they want. But our advantage is our size. We want to be open when we're supposed to be open, and trying to run routes like a receiver and that you're going in 100%, out 100%. That's not even good for them at times, right? Certainly for us, it doesn't do us any because it's just harder to de-accelerate in that way. So, I got 2 questions left, and both of them were actually similarly asked questions between coaches and players. Specifically, if you're on the back side of a run, so it might be the tackle's pulling or the tackle's down blocking, but you're trying to cut off that backside defensive end. that's probably one of the tougher jobs, especially, you might be in motion getting there, or, maybe you're lucky enough to be anchored in as a tight end. But if you're on the backside of a run scheme, I think a lot of times, you're just on the backside, just cut the guy off. You know what I mean? And it's certainly not as simple as that. What would be kind of your advice for, your hands, your eyes, and your feet in terms of when you're cutting a guy off on the backside of inside or outside zone, or even if there's pullers going away from you and you're cutting that guy off? Mario, you want to start with that one?
I think it all comes down to timing, as funny as that is, because you know where you have to get, but you don't want to get there too soon, and you don't want to show the defender what you're going to do too soon. If I were to just get out of my stance and go and cut right away, he's just going to put his hands down, throw me down, step over top of me, made me go make the play, right? I think it's making it look like you're coming down, or making it look like you're adding into the backside of that zone, having your hands up, ready to flash, like you're ready to punch. And then right at the last second, as he's ready to, really, really ready to take on the contact, that's when you have to aim for mid-thigh and just keep running your feet. A lot of people think that a cut block is just laying down and kind of hoping for the best. You can't go that way, especially when you get to the level that we're at. These guys, everyone tries to catch these guys. So these guys get pretty good at avoiding the cuts, I would say. So it's getting to your spot, making it look like it's not going to be a cut. Making it look like you're just going to drive him down the line, and then at the last second, pulling your trigger and shooting for that hip.
Anything to add to that there, Nikola?
I agree with that. Just try not to make it obvious, and then if you want, what I've always think of is stay up on your feet as long as you can. If you're trying to cut someone off, maybe give them a rip, even though they're trying to rip, you could rip again and try to stay in front of them. But if they're in front of you, then you have to make a saving block. Then your only really other option is to cut. But other than that, everything depends on the frame that the athlete, depending on what the athlete looks like and their frame, that will determine what your techniques you use. If he's maybe smaller than you, then maybe you don't actually have to cut him. Maybe you could just get in front of him. Or if he's bigger than you and you try and you're running your feet, but he's not going anywhere, he keeps running, maybe then you really do have to cut him. So I think every situation is a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, anything to add there?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out briefly. So are you saying if you're on the backside, cutting off a backside C and you have no help?
Yeah, you got no help. So you have the option, Mario kind of took it, if you're literally cut blocking.
Literally have to.
It doesn't have to be a literal cut block though. Just in terms of you have the backside C on a run, and you're.
Well, I'm sure with most football questions, it depends what you got in front of you, right? Nicholas said that, right? One, it depends on the athlete that you got in front of you. Two, what their tendencies are, and three, what type of defense they got, right? Ottawa in 2018 ran 2 wide nines that I think every other player either actually had to go and step out to him to cut off the backside, or I would just sift and go up to the next level because he's so far wide. But if he's tight, right, if he's inside eye and I'm not cutting, I think the best thing that McCarty ever said to me was there was one play this year against Edmonton where I got beat inside. I had it alone. John White got hit in the backfield. After the game, he came and gave me a hug. He's like, "Man, get off the ball." and that is just, it's the best tip you can have because these guys are so fast. If you know the snap count, you know this, there's no reason for you not to know it. And if you can anticipate, especially for the most part, it depends on how much your team trusts you, the schemes. If you're alone, we're trying to go hard to the play side. So that means it's probably a 2nd and 3 or, no more than 5 yards for the first down. So you got to earn those yards. So you really got to dig it out. And I think the best thing that I started capitalizing on this year was your inside hand, right? Nikola touched on a rip, right? And you can throw a rip, but it can be useless, right? If you just throw if you actually rip and then actually utilize that hand for strength instead of ripping and then just trying to throw your head. Right, it's actually ripping through and actually trying to grab chest plate with that inside hand. Because then once you're ripped underneath, for the most part, their arms either going to be caught up under yours or, within yours. And then that's when it boils down to a man versus man, whether if he's bigger, if he's smaller, whatever it may be. And that's one thing that I really loved. And me and Mario worked on it a lot is that once you actually use that inside hand, you can either slap with that other hand or just drive your head across, right? That's one thing that. Go ahead.
The biggest thing is driving your feet once you get to that point too, because you're gonna get to a stalemate and you're gonna think, okay, I gotta stop and I gotta just hold them in there. No, you gotta keep driving because you're gonna ride them all the way down the line, right?
Because what's the worst that happens? One, you're rushing. Now that C gap's closed, right? If you're in it and he's in it, it's not going anywhere. And if you've actually lost ground to gain ground, you've got that inside hand, you've ripped across, and okay, now if last case you can either cut or you run him into the tackle and whoever he's blocking, or at the end of the day,
just create a pile.
Like Charleston Hughes wants to go around, right? Charleston Hughes wants to cut all the way around. Well, guess what? He's not making the play anymore, right? Unless something gets blown up on the front side, he's not making the play, so now you can sit. So if my biggest thing is get off the ball and use that backside hand.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the tougher blocks I found to coach. Like Mar, like we spent a lot of time on having a good first step, and it's funny how much just really comes down to get off the ball and play what's in front of you. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about before, Dave, where it comes down to so much of once you feel comfortable with what you're doing, you're able to assess what the defender's actually trying to do, and that's where you really feel confident. Last question, and again, it's a more general question because I think so many schemes are different in what fullbacks are asked to do, whether it's kicking out on power or being a front side guy in a more zone scheme or whatever it is. But whenever you're in space, and this is a great question for special teams too, because certainly any all you guys can attest to, that's where fullbacks are making their living, whether it's NFL or CFL, and even in the youth sports level, right? If you're going to be on a roster, you got to be able to play on teams. So you guys are in a lot of situations where you're blocking a guy in space before contact. So whether that's on a kickoff return where there might be space between you and the guy you're blocking, or maybe you're a puller on some kind of power scheme and you're inserting, or even if you're just front side on outside zone climbing to a linebacker. If you're in space, where are you kind of trying to keep your eyes, and like what's your approach to that defender like? Because I think that's one of the things, and obviously it changes a lot based on the situation, but if you could even just describe one situation and what you're looking at and kind of how you approach that contact, because I think so many mistakes that happen at contact are all about your pre-contact approach and where your body is or what you're focusing on as you go to make that. So Nikola, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. So depending on of course, offense and special teams is very similar, but quite different as well. And that's the thing, within the special teams, it's a kickoff is much different than a punt, but you can still use very similar features. So common things are you always want to, when you're running with the guy, let's say, maybe you want to keep your eyes on his hip, not on his head, because the hip, he can't really twist his hip, throw his hip, and it'll expose him and tell you where he's going. Whereas if you're following his eyes, then you're not gonna really, he's gonna head fake you, you're gonna go that way, he's just gonna switch, swim, whatever. Another thing is your feet positioning. So on kickoff return, let's say, when you're approaching, or on offense, when you're approaching a block, you always want to kind of duck feet and act as if you're a duck landing on a pond or something like that. So you want to just chatter, and then make contact. And when you do make contact, you have to use your hands and give them a good punch. And you gotta train and have that punch ready in your arsenal. And just have always when you're punching as well, you always want to kind of take a quarter of the man. It's much more easy to tell them where to go when you punch a quarter of them. Whereas unless you're some absurd strength, but if you come in and you punch them in the chest, they might not move as much as if you want to punch them in the shoulder to turn them this way. So those are a couple, I think, that helped me. For sure. Dave?
Yeah, that was great stuff, man. I think there's one thing that I always like to compare it to is the special teams and in offense, like you stated. And the way I treat it is that kickoff return is very much like a zone scheme, right? Yeah. You very much know the angle that you're trying to attack. You're aiming for the outside shoulder. Inside zone's the same way, or outside zone, whatever. You're taking a piece of a man. You either got a double team, a single team. Whether which lane, or for us, it was okay, you got to go from the hash to this. You know how Ryan Bolt operates too, right? Yeah. But then the way I consider punt return is very much like you climbing to the next level on a gap scheme, right? If you're the inserter, right? And the biggest point on those, especially punt return, is knowing the point of attack, right? On punt return, you know the point of attack is the returner, right? You know that everyone on the punt team is running towards that returner. So if there's no point you chasing, right? And that's a big thing that, you know, punt return has got to be the most exhausting team in football if you're doing it right. But you can make it a little more efficient if you are understanding where your returner is going, right? Unless you got someone crazy back there doing whatever the hell they want. But if you know it's a field return, why are you chasing down the backside hip of your man if you know that eventually he's going to start bending to the outside, right? So you got to cut him off because you know the point of attack. Use your knowledge, you know, to your advantage. And it's very much the same way if you're building to the next level, right? Okay, if your running back follows off the kick block, which you now insert, you know that the same linebacker or MAC linebacker, whoever you're responsible for, is going to bubble over because he doesn't care about you. He cares about the guy with the ball. Yeah. But you know that you have to meet him at the point of attack. So utilize your knowledge of where the ball is going to be. Don't just chase guys around. Sure, great tip, like Nicholas said. Track their hip, not their head, right? Get your feet ready for contact. But know where the contact is going to be before it takes place, because then you're not surprised, right? If it's a linebacker that you're building up to, if it's someone that's 30 yards down the field on a punt return, you know roughly where that contact is going to take place so you can be prepared for it.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that, as you know, for the guys that really love the game, and, you know, maybe not all of us start at the same time, but I think some guys, you know, year to year, they're maybe learning a new position or whatever, especially a fullback. But once you're kind of in it and you have the time to develop that understanding of your offensive system or whatever it is, those are the things that can make you so much more efficient. Mario, anything else there?
Tough to add on to that. Like, you guys honestly covered everything, but what I would say, what I do personally, I always think close the space and then feet and hands as soon as I get there. So what I mean by closing the space is that whether I'm on punt return or kickoff return, at some point I know I'm going to have to make contact, and I want to make contact further up the field, not closer back by the returner. If I'm making contact back by the returner, I can blow up a lot of things, and a lot of things can go wrong. If I take away his space earlier and he wants to change direction or change up on me and go different ways, I know that I have some space to kind of work with, knowing where the returner is going to where the returner is going to catch the ball. So if I know the returner is going to catch the ball at 10 yards, I would say, or at the 10-yard line, sorry, I'm going to close off that space 45, 35 yards upfield, because it gives me 25 to 30 yards to kind of like make up for any mistakes or anything that might have happened during the rep.
That's our show for today. I want to thank Hamilton Tiger Cats tight end Nikola Kalinic, BC Lions fullbacks and tight ends Mario Villamizar and David Mackie for coming on the show, talking shop about all things two back. Make sure if you like this video, you follow us on all of our social medias and subscribe to us on YouTube so you can get our daily content each week.